Welcome to Inside Vietnam. I'm your host, and today's story is one that'll challenge everything you think you know about expat cautionary tales. This is Earl Hutchins, 67 years old, retired union electrician from Mobile, Alabama. Earl came to Da Nang 3 years ago with his entire life savings and a heart that had already stopped once. What happened next changed everything. He met someone who made him believe he finally mattered. He opened his wallet, and he opened his heart. And then he discovered the truth. But here's where Earl's story takes a turn you won't see coming. This one's gonna stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. My name's Earl Hutchins, and I spent 43 years as a union electrician in Mobile, Alabama. Commercial work mostly. Big box stores, office parks, strip malls. The kind of buildings you drive past without thinking twice about who wired the lights that let you see the cereal aisle at 2 in the morning. That was me. Local 505. Good pension, good benefits, steady work. Never missed a day except when my back went out in '06. Never got married. Came close once, back in my 30s. Girl named Sharon. Pretty thing. Worked at the Piggly Wiggly on Airport Boulevard. We dated about 2 years, talked about getting a place together, the whole 9 yards. But she sat me down one Sunday after church and said I loved overtime more than I loved her. Said I was married to the job. And you know what? She was probably right. I didn't fight it much. Just let her go, picked up an extra shift that week, and that was that. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried harder, but mostly I just got on with it. So that was my life. Work, home, work, home. Sunday calls with my brother Danny up in Birmingham. Sundays watching Alabama football in my duplex on Old Shell Road. Gas station sandwiches for lunch because I never learned to cook much beyond eggs and bacon. Scrolling through AL.com at night, reading about other people's lives while mine just ticked along like a clock nobody bothered to wind. Then came the heart attack. I was 64. Working a rewiring job at the new Walmart out on Schillinger Road. We were 3 weeks into the project, running conduit through the back storage area. Hot as hell even with the AC going. I remember thinking my chest felt tight, but I figured it was just the heat, maybe indigestion from the Subway I'd had for lunch. Then it felt like somebody had connected jumper cables to my rib cage and hit the switch. Just pure voltage running through me, dropping me to my knees right there between the electrical panel and a pallet of paper towels. The paramedics said I was lucky. Somebody called 911 right away. They got me to UAB Hospital in Mobile, had me on a table within 40 minutes. 3 days I spent in that cardiac unit with wires and monitors running everywhere. The irony wasn't lost on me. 43 years making sure other people's electrical systems worked right, and mine had shorted out. My cardiologist was this young guy, probably early 40s, Dr. Patel. He didn't sugarcoat things, said I'd done permanent damage to my heart, said I needed to reduce stress, lose about 40 pounds, maybe find something worth living for besides overtime. That last part, he didn't say it mean. He said it like he was trying to save my life, which I guess he was. I remember lying there in that hospital bed on day 3, staring at the ceiling tiles. They had these water stains, kind of shaped like the state of Florida if you squinted. And I started doing the math in my head. Who would I call when they discharged me? Danny would come if I asked, but he'd make that face, that disappointed big brother face. My shop steward would check in, make sure I filed the workers' comp right. That was about it. No wife, no kids, no girlfriend. Just me in a duplex that looked exactly the same whether I came home or not. And that's when it hit me. If I died on that Walmart floor, Danny would have come to the funeral out of obligation. Maybe a few guys from the union. They'd have said nice things about my work ethic, about how I never cut corners on a job, and then they'd have gone home, and I'd have been forgotten by Tuesday. 43 years of making sure other people's lights stayed on, and my own place had stayed dark the whole time. Dr. Trough. Patel came by that afternoon with my discharge papers. He sat down on the edge of the bed, which doctors don't usually do, and he looked me dead in the eye. He said, "Earl, you can keep living like this and maybe make it to 70. Or you can find something worth living for. Your choice." Those were his exact words. Your choice. They sent me home with a pill organizer that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Beta blockers, statins, baby aspirin, instructions to walk 30 minutes a day, eat better, reduce stress. I sat in my duplex that first week, scrolling through AL.com like I always did, waiting for Danny's Sunday call that came at 4:15 like clockwork. And I realized I couldn't do another decade of this. I just couldn't. The call with Danny that Sunday, I didn't answer it. First time in maybe 20 years. He called back twice, left a voicemail asking if I was all right. I texted him I was fine, just needed some space. He texted back a thumbs up emoji. That was it. Nobody checking on me, nobody needing me. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my neighbor's television through the wall. I started having these thoughts at night, not suicidal exactly, but just this heaviness. Like, what was the point of surviving the heart attack if this was all there was? I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, chest tight with anxiety, wondering if this was it. If I'd just run out the clock now until the next heart attack finished what the first one started. Eat my gas station sandwiches, watch my Alabama games, wait for the end. That's when I knew something had to change. I didn't know what yet, but something. About 2 months after the heart attack, I was in for my follow-up with Dr. Patel. He checked my blood pressure, listened to my heart, asked about the walking. I told him I'd been doing it, which was true. 30 minutes around the neighborhood every evening, past the same ranch houses and chain-link fences I'd been looking at for 15 years. He nodded, said my numbers look better, but then he got quiet. He said, "Earl, your heart's healing, but you're not." Those were his words. You're not. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just sat there on the exam table in my socks and that paper gown. He pulled up his rolling stool and said his uncle had retired at 65, sat in front of the TV for 3 years, and died of another heart attack at 68. Said the body can heal, but if the spirit's got nothing to live for, it doesn't much matter. He asked if I'd thought about traveling, about doing something I'd always wanted to do. I told him I'd never really wanted much of anything except steady work and a paycheck. He wrote something on a piece of paper, handed it to me. It said affordable retirement abroad. He told me his wife's cousin had moved to Thailand, was living on next to nothing, seemed happier than he'd ever been. Said it might be worth looking into. I folded the paper, put it in my wallet, figured I'd forget about it. But I didn't forget about it. That night, alone in the duplex with the TV playing Alabama highlights I'd seen a dozen times, I pulled out my laptop, started searching. Affordable retirement abroad. Southeast Asia retirement. Cheap places to live overseas. The YouTube algorithm took over from there. And suddenly I was watching videos of American guys my age or older, living in places with palm trees and beaches, talking about spending $800 a month and living like kings. Most of the videos were Thailand. Looked nice enough, but something about it seemed too wild for me. Too many people, too chaotic. Philippines kept coming up too, but the infrastructure looked rough in the videos. Brownouts, flooding, sketchy electrical work that made my professional brain itch. Then Da Nang started appearing, Vietnam, Central Coast. This city I'd never heard of, but that looked clean, modern. Good roads, high rises, beaches that went on for miles. I watched maybe 30 videos over the next 2 weeks. Guys talking about their one-bedroom apartments for $400 a month. Coffee for $1. Meals for $2-3. The math started working itself out in my head the way electrical loads do when you're planning a panel. My pension was $4,200 a month. In mobile, that covered my duplex at $1,200, utilities, food, gas, insurance, and left me maybe $800 if I was careful. In Da Nang, according to these videos, I could live on $1,200 easy and bank $3,000 a month. Or I could live on $1,800, have a nicer place, eat better, still save over $2,000. But it was more than the math. It was watching these guys talk about their lives. Morning coffee, looking at the ocean, motorbikes everywhere, street food vendors. A whole different pace. One video I kept coming back to was this older guy, maybe 70, talking about his daily routine. He'd wake up, walk on the beach, get a coffee, read a book at a cafe, eat lunch for $3, take a nap, go out for dinner, come home. He said the same thing every day in mobile felt like dying in slow motion, but the same thing every day in Da Nang felt like living. That stuck with me. I did my research the way I'd research any job. Looked up the electrical grid, 220 volts, 50 hertz, mostly stable in the cities. Looked up the visa situation. Tourists could get 3 months easy, extensions available, retirement visas possible. Looked up the expat groups on Facebook. Thousands of Americans, Brits, Australians, all living there. Some had been there 20 years. Some had horror stories about getting scammed or dating the wrong people. But hell, that could happen in mobile too. 3 weeks of research, I made my decision. I'd go for 3 months. If I hated it, I'd come home and I'd only be out the cost of the visa and the ticket. If the place was half as good as the videos made it look, maybe I'd found my something worth living for. The visa cost me $650. The ticket was another $900. My neighbor agreed to keep an eye on the duplex. I told Danny I was going to Vietnam for the winter. He said, "Vietnam? Like the war?" I said, "No, Danny, like the country." He asked if I'd lost my mind. I said maybe, but at least I'd lost it somewhere warm. I landed at Da Nang International Airport on a Tuesday morning in late October. Soon as they opened the plane door, the heat hit me like walking into a furnace. Thick, wet heat that wrapped around you and didn't let go. I'd packed light, just one big duffel and my tool bag with my basic electrical kit. And even that felt like too much by the time I got through customs. The airport was modern, clean, air-conditioned. That surprised me. I'd expected something run down, third world, but it looked newer than Mobile's airport. Signs in Vietnamese and English. People in uniforms moving efficiently. Outside, though, was chaos. Taxi drivers swarming, holding signs, shouting prices. I'd researched this part too, new to use Grab, which is like their Uber. Cost me 120,000 dong to get to my apartment, which sounds like a fortune but was about $5. The drive into the city was sensory overload, motorbikes everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Hundreds of them, weaving through traffic like schools of fish. Whole families on one bike. Guy texting while driving with his knees. Woman in a face mask and gloves even though it was 95 degrees. My driver didn't speak English, just nodded when I showed him the address. My apartment was near N Tuong Beach. I'd rented it for a month through one of the expat Facebook groups, $400, utilities included. The guy who owned it was Australian, had 3 properties he rented to foreigners. When I walked in, I couldn't believe it. Studio apartment, sure, but newer than my mobile duplex. Tile floors, air conditioning that worked, a little balcony overlooking the street, bed, table, hot plate, mini fridge, everything I needed. The Australian guy, Trevor, gave me the keys, showed me how the AC worked, told me the best places to eat nearby, and left. I sat on that balcony that first afternoon, drinking a warm beer I'd bought at the Circle K down the street, watching the motorbikes and listening to the city. The noise was constant, but different from Mobile. Higher pitched, musical almost. Vietnamese voices calling out, the beep beep of the bikes, someone's karaoke machine 3 floors down playing a song I didn't recognize. The South China Sea was 2 blocks away. I could smell it in the air, salt and fish and something else I couldn't name. That first week, I spent every day just walking, mapping the neighborhood in my head the way I'd map a building's electrical system. This street had the good coffee shops. That street had the local restaurants where no English was spoken. This corner had the fruit vendors. That intersection had the Exiom drivers who'd take you anywhere for a couple bucks. I bought a dog-eared Vietnamese phrase book at a bookstore. Started trying to learn the basics, Jin Ko for hello, Kamen for thank you, Bao Na Hu for how much. My accent was terrible. Pure Alabama trying to wrap itself around tones I couldn't hear, but people smiled when I tried. The expat coffee shops were easy to find. Big groups of Western guys, mostly older, sitting around talking about visa runs and where to get real bacon and whether the new police crackdown on overstays was serious or not. I sat in on a few of those conversations, mostly listened. Some of those guys had been there 10, 15 years. Some were on their second or third Vietnamese wife or girlfriend. Some seemed happy. Some seemed like they were running from something back home and hadn't figured out yet that you can't outrun yourself. But the anonymity was what got me. Nobody in Da Nang knew me as Earl the electrician. Nobody knew about the heart attack, or Sharon, or the 43 years of commercial work. I was just another older Western guy, and there were enough of us that nobody looked twice. I could walk down the street and be nobody, and that was the most liberating feeling I'd had in years. Week 3, I was eating lunch at this little place near the beach, local spot, not touristy. They had these little plastic tables and stools on the sidewalk, and I'd ordered bun chu because I'd seen it on a food video, and it looked good. Grilled pork, noodles, herbs, a bowl of sauce to dip everything in. I was struggling with the chopsticks, trying not to make a mess, when this woman came over. She was Vietnamese, probably late 30s, pretty in a normal way. Not dolled up, just pretty. She had on jeans and a white blouse, had her hair pulled back. She smiled and said, "You need fork?" Her English was accented but clear. I said, "No, ma'am, I'm trying to learn." She laughed, not mean, just genuine. She said, "Your accent very different." "Where are you from?" I told her Alabama. She looked confused. I said, "It's in the South." America. She said, "Ah, like Texas." I said, "Close enough." Her name was Lynn. She said her father owned the restaurant she sometimes helped out. She was a teacher at an elementary school nearby, taught English and math. I learned later she was 38, never married, lived with her mother. That first conversation, though, was just small talk. She explained the different items on the menu, showed me the right way to mix the sauce, laughed when I mispronounced siamengen. I said it like, "Come on," and she gently corrected me, made me repeat it 5 times until I got closer. She asked what brought me to Vietnam. I gave her the short version. Retired, wanted to try something different. Heard Da Nang was nice. She said, "You pick good city, not crazy like Saigon, not boring like Hanoi. Just right." I asked if she'd traveled much. She said no, taking care of her mother, teaching, not much money for travel. But someday maybe. That was it. She had to get back to work. I finished my lunch, left money on the table, and walked back to my apartment. I didn't think much about it except that it had been nice to have a real conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or warn me about Vietnamese women. But then I went back to that restaurant 2 days later, and she was there again. She smiled like she recognized me, came over during her break, asked how I was settling in. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. She recommended other places to eat, told me about a market where I could buy cheap clothes, asked about Alabama. What was it like there? Was it true? Everyone owned guns? I laughed, said some folks did, but mostly it was just hot and flat and not nearly as interesting as Da Nang. The third time I came back, she sat down with me for real. Said she was practicing her English, hoped I didn't mind. I said I didn't mind at all. We talked about teaching, about electrical work, about the differences between Vietnam and America. She asked about my family. I told her about Danny, about never getting married, about spending most of my life working. She said that was sad, being alone so long. I said it was just how things worked out. She said, in Vietnam, family very important, nobody alone. Looking back now, I should have seen it. But right then, sitting at that plastic table with the motorbikes buzzing past and the smell of grilled pork in the air, and this woman actually listening to me talk about my life, I just felt seen. For the first time in I don't know how long, somebody was asking me questions not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Not a doctor checking boxes, not my brother doing his duty, just a person interested in another person. I called Danny that week, showed him the view from my balcony on video chat, the beach, the palm trees, the motorbikes. He said, "You really did it, huh?" I said, "I really did." He said, "Just don't do anything stupid, Earl." I said I wouldn't. But I didn't tell him about Lynn. Didn't seem like there was anything to tell yet. Over the next 2 months, Lynn and I fell into a routine. She'd meet me for coffee twice a week, usually Tuesday and Thursday mornings, before she had to be at school. We'd sit at this little cafe near the beach, the kind with the tiny plastic chairs that made my knees ache, but I didn't care. She'd teach me Vietnamese phrases, correct my terrible pronunciation, laugh at the way I said things. I'd tell her about electrical work, about Alabama, about life in America. She'd tell me about her students, about Vietnamese culture, about her family. She made about 12 million dong a month teaching, which was around $500. That shocked me at first, that somebody educating kids made so little, but she said it was normal, that most teachers in Vietnam made about that. She lived with her mother in a house about 2 kilometers from the restaurant, helped support her since her father had died 2 years before. Heart attack, same as what almost got me. She'd never been married, said she'd been too focused on her career and taking care of her family. No time for romance. I appreciated the pace of it. No pressure, no agenda. Just 2 people getting to know each other. She'd insist on paying for coffee sometimes, wouldn't let me cover everything. Said she wasn't some poor girl who needed taken care of. That impressed me. All the warnings I'd heard from other expats were about women who saw dollar signs the second a Western guy walked in. Lynn wasn't like that. Around week 7, she invited me to meet her family. Sunday dinner at their house. I was nervous as hell. Bought a fruit basket at the market, some nice tea. Didn't want to show up empty-handed. Their place was in a neighborhood away from the tourist areas. Down these narrow alleys where the houses were packed tight together. 2 stories, concrete, the kind of place that'd been there 30, 40 years. Her mother was 58, small woman, gray hair, kind eyes but cautious. Her sister Mai was 34, married with 2 kids, a boy and a girl maybe 6 and 8 years old. Mai's husband, Tuan, worked in construction management. The whole family was there. Sitting around this low table in the living room, ceiling fan going, smells of cooking coming from the kitchen. Lynn translated everything. Her mother asked where I was from, what I did, why I came to Vietnam. Standard questions, but I could tell she was sizing me up, trying to figure out if I was one of those Western guys looking for a good time, or something more serious. I told her the truth. Worked my whole life, had a heart attack, realized I wanted to see something different before it was too late. She nodded, seemed to accept that. The meal was incredible. Com tam, grilled pork, spring rolls, vegetables, rice, everything homemade. We ate and talked, or tried to talk through Lynn's translations. The kids warmed up to me after a while, showed me their school books, asked if I could speak English with them. I helped Mai's son with some English homework, and that seemed to win the mother over a bit. After dinner, I noticed their ceiling fan was wobbling bad, making this clicking noise. Asked Lynn if I could take a look. Found the problem quick enough. Wiring was loose, connection was bad, whole thing was a fire hazard waiting to happen. Spent maybe 20 minutes fixing it proper, tightening everything down, making sure it was safe. When I finished, the mother smiled for the first time all evening, said something to Lynn. Lynn translated, "She says you have good hands, good heart." That meant something to me. They invited me back the next Sunday, and the next. It became a routine. I'd bring small gifts, nothing fancy, fruit, tea, candy for the kids. I'd help around the house when I saw things needed fixing. A loose electrical socket here, a light switch there. Never asked for money, just glad to be useful, glad to be part of something that felt like family. My 3-month visa was coming up on expiration around week 11. I'd been in Vietnam almost 3 months, and I hadn't thought much about going back to Mobile. The place felt more like home than anywhere I'd been in years. But technically I had to leave, do a visa run, or go back to the States. That's when Lynn cried. We were having coffee one morning, and I mentioned I'd probably need to head back to Alabama soon, sort out my visa situation. She got quiet, looked down at her cup, and tears just started falling. She said, "I know we only friends, but I never meet someone like you. Someone so patient, so kind, who really listen. Most men just talk. You listen." I didn't know what to say. Felt like my chest was tight again, but different from the heart attack. She said, "I understand if you go. You have your life. But I wish you could stay. I never felt like this before." That did it. I told her I'd be back, that I'd go to Alabama for 3 weeks, settle my affairs, and come back with a proper visa. She looked up at me with those wet eyes and asked if I meant it. I said I did. I flew back to Mobile 2 days later. Rented the duplex to my nephew for $800 a month. Sold my F5 1080 to a guy at the Union Hall. Sold most of my tools, except for my basic electrical kit. Kept my important papers, a few photos, not much else. Called Danny, told him I was going back to Vietnam for at least a year, maybe longer. He thought I'd lost my mind. We met for lunch at a Cracker Barrel off I-65. He sat across from me, shaking his head, saying, "Earl, you barely know this woman. You've been there 3 months. What if it doesn't work out? What if she's just using you?" I told him maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. But I'd been dead man walking crazy in Mobile for 43 years. Might as well try alive and stupid crazy in Vietnam. He asked what Sharon would think. I said Sharon left me 25 years ago because I didn't know how to live for anything except work. Said maybe this was my chance to figure out what else there was. He didn't have an answer for that. Just said be careful, call him if I needed anything, and picked up the check. 3 weeks later, I landed back in Da Nang with a 1-year visa. 65 years old, carrying everything I owned in 2 duffels, stepping back into that wall of heat and humidity. Lynn met me at the airport. She'd taken the afternoon off from teaching. When she saw me coming through arrivals, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in maybe ever. She didn't hug me, that's not really done in Vietnamese culture, but she took my bag and said, "Welcome home." That's when things changed between us. Became romantic, but slow, age-appropriate, comfortable. We'd have dinner together most evenings. I'd walk her home, meet her for coffee in the mornings. She still kept her own apartment, still paid for meals half the time, still went to work every day. She had her life, and I had mine, but they were starting to overlap in ways that felt real. I joined an expat group that met every week at a bar in An Thuong. 12 Western guys, mostly my age or older. They'd share stories about their Vietnamese girlfriends or wives, warn newcomers about scams, talk about visa issues. I heard it all. The girl who took 50 grand and disappeared. The wife who brought her whole family to live in the guy's house. the teacher who turned out to be working at a karaoke bar on the side. I'd listen and think, that's not Lynn. Lynn had a real job, a real family, a real life. She wasn't some bar girl looking for a meal ticket. When other expats would give me knowing looks and say, just wait, brother, just wait, I'd think they were bitter. They'd gone looking for love in the wrong places and found exactly what they deserved. About 6 months after I got back, so 9 months total in Vietnam, Lynn mentioned her school was having problems. Electrical issues. Lights flickering, outlets not working, breakers tripping constantly. She asked if maybe I could take a look, just as a favor, see what the issue was. I went with her on a Saturday morning. The school was small, maybe 200 kids, 5 or 6 classrooms, and an old building near the city center. Soon as I walked in, my professional brain started screaming. The wiring was ancient, probably original from the 70s. Exposed conduit, overloaded circuits, no ground fault protection. I pulled a few outlet covers, checked the panels. It was dangerous. Not just code violations, but actual fire hazard dangerous. Kids' lives at risk kind of dangerous. I told Lynn the truth, said the whole building needed rewiring. Proper panels, modern breakers, grounded outlets, the works. She looked devastated. Asked how much that would cost. I did some quick math in my head, figured labor and materials and Vietnam prices. Said probably $12,000, maybe a bit more. She said the school didn't have that kind of money, that they could barely afford supplies and teacher salaries, that they'd just have to make do, be careful, hope nothing bad happened. I couldn't let that sit. Spent 43 years making sure electrical systems were safe. Couldn't walk away from kids sitting in classrooms with faulty wiring over their heads. I told her I'd pay for it. She said no immediately, said that was too much, that I couldn't do that. I said, Lynn, these are kids' lives. This is what I know. This is what I can do. Let me do this. She protested for another 10 minutes, but I was firm. I had the money sitting in my savings account back in Alabama. $95,000 I'd saved over 43 years of work. What was I saving it for? To sit in a mobile duplex alone until I died. No, this mattered. This was real. I wired $12,000 to a local contractor Lynn knew. He'd do the work, I'd oversee it, make sure it was done right. Lynn cried when I signed the paperwork. Said I was the most generous man she'd ever known. Said she didn't deserve someone like me. I told her everyone deserves to be safe, especially kids, and this wasn't about deserving anything. This was about doing right. Looking back now, that was the first step. That was when I started believing I could buy my way into mattering to someone. But right then, it felt like the best decision I'd ever made. It felt like I was finally building something that would last. The school renovation started 2 weeks later. I couldn't do the work myself, not at my age, and not with visa restrictions about foreigners working, but I checked in every week. Watched the contractor run new conduit, install modern panels, ground everything proper. Lynn would come with me sometimes, translate when I had questions about the work. She kept saying I was spending too much, worrying too much, that I should let it go. I told her what else was my money for. I was living on $1,200 a month, comfortable. My pension kept rolling in every month, $4,200 like clockwork. My savings were just sitting there in Alabama, not doing anything. Might as well build something that would outlast me. But month 11, everything changed. Lynn started acting different, distracted. Her eyes were puffy like she'd been crying. She'd zone out during our coffee talks, apologize, say she was just tired from work. I knew something was wrong, but she kept saying everything was fine. Finally, I pressed her on it. We were having dinner at a Comtam place near her mother's house, and she barely touched her food. I put down my chopsticks and said, Lynn, what's going on? You're not yourself. She looked at me with these scared eyes and just shook her head. I said, whatever it is, you can tell me. That's when she broke down. Started crying right there in the restaurant. Said her mother was sick, real sick, kidney problems. Had been hiding it for months because she didn't want to burden anyone. Needed surgery. Without it, the doctor said she had maybe a year, maybe less. With it, she'd be fine, could live another 20 years easy. I asked how much. Lynn said the hospital quoted 620 million dong. I did the math in my head. About $28,000. She said there was no way. Her teaching salary was $500 a month. Mai's family didn't have that kind of money. They'd been trying to save, but it was impossible. She said they'd just have to accept it, take care of her mother as best they could, make her comfortable. I remembered my own mother. Diabetes, complications, needed treatment she kept putting off because Medicare didn't cover enough. and she didn't want to burden anyone with the costs. By the time she finally went to the hospital, it was too late. She died at 63. I was 30, working a job site in Biloxi. Got the call from Danny, flew home for the funeral, spent the whole time thinking about how she'd have lived if she'd just gotten help sooner. I told Lynn I'd pay for the surgery. Her eyes went wide. She said no, absolutely not. That was insane. Too much money. I said, Lynn, I watched my mama die because she waited too long. I can't watch somebody else's mama die when I got the means to help. I just can't. She cried harder, said she couldn't accept it, that it was too generous, that she'd never be able to pay me back. I said I wasn't asking for payback. I said this was what mattered. This was real. This was a life. What was I going to do with $28,000 otherwise? Let it sit in a bank while her mother died. The surgery was scheduled for 3 weeks out. I wired the money directly to the hospital, got receipts, made sure everything was legitimate. Lynn's mother went in on a Thursday morning. The surgery took 6 hours. I sat in that waiting room with Lynn and Mai and Tuan and the kids, drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine, watching Vietnamese news on a TV mounted in the corner that I couldn't understand. When the doctor came out and said everything went well, that her mother would recover, Lynn grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight I thought she'd break something. Mai hugged me, which surprised me because Vietnamese people don't usually hug. Even Tuan shook my hand, said something in Vietnamese that sounded grateful. At the hospital 2 days later, Lynn's mother was sitting up in bed, looking tired but alive. She saw me come in, held out her hand. I took it. She said something to Lynn, who translated. She says you are her son now. She says you saved her life. And in Vietnam, that means you are family forever. She called me Contre, son. I felt something in my chest, but good this time. Like a circuit finally completing. After that, I was Uncle Earl to everyone. Mai's kids started calling me that without being asked. I got invited to everything. Birthday parties, school events, holiday dinners. Lynn and I started talking about the future. Maybe getting married once her mother was fully recovered, once we were sure everything was stable. She said she wanted to do it right, traditional, with her mother's blessing. I said I'd wait as long as she needed. Month 13, Tuan approached me at a Sunday dinner, said he had a business opportunity, wondered if I'd be interested. He and some partners were opening a restaurant in the An Thuong area, tourist zone, lots of foot traffic, good location. They needed $35,000 for a 30% stake. Monthly returns projected at around $1,500, maybe $2,000 once the place was established. Said he thought of me because I was family now, and family takes care of each other. We drove out to see the location the next week. Empty storefront right off the main drag, 3 blocks from the beach. Good space, lots of windows, high ceilings. Met the other partners, 2 Vietnamese guys who seemed legitimate. They had plans, menu ideas, talked about the growing expat market. My electrician brain liked the idea of income-generating assets. $35,000 to own a piece of something that'd pay me back every month. That made sense. Lynn translated all the paperwork. Everything was in Vietnamese, but she went through it line by line. Ownership stake, profit sharing, responsibilities. It all seemed legitimate. Tuan said they'd have English paperwork ready within 60 days, that Vietnamese business moved slower than American business, but everything would be proper. I wired the $35,000. Tuan promised the restaurant would open within 3 months, and I'd see my first return 60 days after that. Meanwhile, the school renovation wrapped up. I went to see the finished work. Soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The panels looked right from the outside, but when I opened them up, I saw cheap components. Breakers that weren't the brand I'd specified. Wire gauge that was thinner than it should be. Conduit that was PVC instead of metal in places where metal was required. Shortcuts. Cost cutting. Dangerous. I found Lynn at her classroom, asked her what happened. She looked upset, said the contractor must have substituted materials, must have taken some of the money for himself. Said she was so sorry that she should have watched him closer, that Vietnamese contractors sometimes do this. I felt sick. I'd paid $12,000 to make those kids safe, and they were barely safer than before. But I told myself, different country, different standards. At least it was better than it was. At least the wiring wasn't as ancient as before. I let it go. Didn't want to make Lynn feel worse about it. Didn't want to be the ugly American who expected everything to be done the way it was back home. Month 14, Lynn found land. Small plot about 15 kilometers outside Da Nang. near the mountains. She took me to see it on a Saturday. Beautiful spot, quiet, trees around it, could see the city in the distance. She said we could build a house there. Our house. Something that was ours together. Her eyes were shining when she talked about it. Said she'd been dreaming about this for months. A place where we could grow old together, have Sunday dinners with her family, maybe have her mother move in with us eventually. I asked about foreigners owning land. She said I was right. Foreigners can't own land in Vietnam, but she could put it in her name and we'd be partners. Said lots of expat couples did it this way. Said she'd never do anything to hurt me, that this was about us building a future together. The deposit was $18,000. For the first time, I hesitated. Something felt off. The pace of everything, the amounts. I'd gone from spending nothing to spending $75,000 in 5 months. My savings account that started at $95,000 was down to about $33,000. Still had my pension, still comfortable, but the numbers were moving fast. Lynn noticed my hesitation. Got quiet. We drove back to the city in silence. That night at dinner, she barely talked. I asked what was wrong. She looked at me with hurt in her eyes and said, "I thought you saw a future here with me. I thought we were building something real. If you don't trust me, maybe I was wrong about us." That hit me like voltage. The idea of losing her, of losing the family, of going back to being alone, that scared me more than the money. I said of course I trusted her. Of course I saw a future with her. I was just being careful. She said careful is one thing, but questioning whether she'd cheat me, that hurt. Those were her exact words. That hurt. I paid the deposit the next day. $18,000 wired to the seller's account through Lynn's cousin, who worked in real estate. She said the full purchase would take time, maybe 6 months with all the surveys and permits and paperwork, but this secured it for us. When I signed everything, she hugged me for the first time. Really hugged me. Said she loved me. Said she'd never been sure before, but now she was sure. Said we were going to build something beautiful together. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Because the alternative was that I'd just spent $75,000 on nothing, and I couldn't let myself think that, so I didn't. Life settled into a routine after that. Morning coffee with Lynn near the beach. Vietnamese lessons where she'd teach me more complex phrases and I'd butcher the tones. Helping at her mother's house on weekends, fixing little things, being useful. Sunday dinners with the whole family. Planning the house we'd build together. It felt real. It felt like I'd finally found what I was looking for. But problems started multiplying. 60 days passed after the restaurant investment. No paperwork showed up. No returns. I asked Tuan about it at a Sunday dinner. He got this look on his face, kind of defensive. Said there were delays with permits, with licensing, with approvals from the city. Said Vietnamese bureaucracy was slower than American, that I needed to be patient, that everything would work out. Lynn jumped in, said I was being too American about business. Said Vietnamese culture operates on trust and relationships, not contracts and paperwork. Said Tuan was offended that I was questioning him after he'd welcomed me into the family. I backed down. Apologized. Said I understood, that I was just used to different ways of doing things. Tuan seemed to accept that, but Mai barely looked at me the rest of the dinner. The kids were quieter than usual. Something had shifted. The land deal started having complications too. Lynn said they needed to do a survey before the full purchase could go through, $2,000. Then there were permit fees from the local government, $3,000. Then the local officials needed payments to expedite the process because otherwise it could take years, $2,500. Each time, Lynn would come to me apologetic, explaining how this was just how things worked in Vietnam, how everyone had to pay these fees, how it was normal bureaucracy and corruption, but if we didn't pay, we'd lose the land. I started doing the math in my head. Started with $95,000 in savings, $12,000 for the school, $28,000 for the surgery, $35,000 for the restaurant, $18,000 for the land deposit, another $7,500 in fees and surveys. That was over $100,000. But I'd only had $95,000 to start with. The extra was coming from my pension. I was spending faster than money was coming in. I checked my account. I was down to about $20,000. That cold fear hit my chest again, different from the heart attack, but just as real. I tried to talk to Lynn about it. Said maybe we should slow down, wait on some of these expenses, make sure the restaurant was profitable before we spent more on the land. She didn't take it well. Started crying, said I didn't trust her, said if I was going to question every expense, maybe we shouldn't be together. Said in Vietnam, when you're family, you help each other, you don't nickel and dime everything. Said she thought I was different from other foreigners, but maybe she was wrong. I apologized, paid the fees, told myself she was just stressed. Her mother's recovery, the pressure of the house plans, teaching full time. She had a lot on her plate. I needed to be supportive, not suspicious. But I started noticing other things. Small things that individually didn't mean much, but together made a pattern. Lynn had more late nights at school. Parent meetings, she said. Teacher training. Extra tutoring sessions. Her phone was always face down on the table now. When it buzzed, she'd grab it quick, check it where I couldn't see, then put it back down. When I asked who it was, she'd say, just a colleague, just her sister, nothing important. Sunday dinners got awkward. Mai would barely talk to me. Her kids weren't calling me Uncle Earl anymore, just avoided me. Tuan would give me these looks I couldn't read. Lynn's mother still smiled at me, but it felt different, forced. Month 16, Lynn came to me with another request. Her mother needed medication, expensive medication for the kidney condition, ongoing treatment to make sure she stayed healthy. $4,000. That seemed high to me, but what did I know about Vietnamese medical care? I gave her the money. She said she'd get receipts from the pharmacy. Never saw those receipts. I started lying awake at night doing math, adding up all the money, trying to track where it went, trying to convince myself everything was legitimate. My savings were almost gone, down to maybe 16,000. My pension covered my rent and food, but not much else anymore. I'd gone from comfortable to scraping by in 14 months. Month 17, I was having coffee at that expat group meeting. About 8 of us that week, sitting around a table at a bar in An Thuong, drinking cheap Saigon beer, talking about visa extensions and the best places to get Western food. This British guy, named Tom, been in Vietnam about 5 years, worked remotely for some company back in London, was telling a story about seeing someone he knew at a karaoke bar in Hai Chow district. He said it casual, not accusatory, just making conversation. Said, funny thing, saw that teacher girlfriend of yours, Earl. The one you're always talking about. She was at this karaoke place near the cathedral, looked like she was having a good time with some young Vietnamese bloke, very affectionate they were. Everything stopped. The noise of the bar, the conversations, all of it just went silent in my head. I felt my stomach drop. I said, you sure it was her? Tom shrugged. Said, pretty sure, yeah. Could be wrong though, a lot of Vietnamese women look similar to us foreigners. But she was with an older woman and a younger couple. Looked like a family group. Thought it was odd since she said she doesn't go out much. The other expats got quiet. Nobody looked at me directly. I could feel their pity. I said, must have been her sister or something. Family thing. Tom said, yeah, probably. Sorry, mate, didn't mean to worry you. But he did worry me. The seed was planted. I spent the rest of that meeting distracted, making excuses to leave early. Walked back to my apartment along the beach, watching the sun set over the South China Sea, trying to tell myself it was nothing. Family outing, cousin, mistaken identity. Tom said he could be wrong, but I couldn't let it go. That night, Lynn came over for dinner. We had kamga from a place down the street, ate it on my little balcony like we did sometimes. She was on her phone more than usual, texting someone, smiling at the screen. I asked who it was. She said just Mai, planning next week's Sunday dinner. Put the phone face down on the table. After dinner, she said she needed to shower. She'd been at school all day, felt gross from the heat. I said sure, handed her a towel, heard the water start running. And for the first time in our whole relationship, I did something I'd never done before. Something that made me feel sick even thinking about it. I picked up her phone. It was unlocked. She must have forgotten to lock it. Or maybe she'd gotten comfortable, stopped being careful. The Messages app was right there on the home screen. I opened it. Messages in Vietnamese. Names. Names I didn't recognize. I opened. One, started reading, couldn't understand most of it. I opened Google Translate, started copying text into it, waiting for the translations to appear. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. The first message translated to something about a motorbike. New motorbike. Good price. Can get it next week. $4,000. The same $4,000 I'd just given her for her mother's medication. I kept scrolling. Found messages to someone saved as Anshu Yu. I translated that. My love. My chest felt tight again. I kept reading. Plans for trips. Talking about money. Talking about the old American. That's what she called me. The old American. Laughing about how much longer they could string it along, how much more they could get. There were photos. Lynn with a younger guy, maybe late 20s, intimate photos. Kissing, his hand on her waist, her smiling at him the way she smiled at me. Screenshots of bank transfers, my money, being redistributed, sent to different accounts, some to the guy in the photos, some to numbers I didn't recognize. The shower turned off. I heard her moving around in the bathroom. I put the phone back down exactly where it was, face down, tried to steady my breathing, tried to figure out what to say, how to ask, whether to ask. My whole world was collapsing, and she was going to walk out of that bathroom any second, and I had no idea what to do. She came out in one of my old t-shirts, towel around her hair, saw my face, stopped. She knew. Just from looking at me, she knew. Her expression changed. Not guilty, not apologetic, just cold, calculating, like a mask dropping. She said, "You look at my phone." Not a question, a statement. I nodded. Couldn't speak. She sat down across from me. No tears, no explanations, just looked at me like I was stupid. Said, "So now you know." Those were her exact words, "So now you know." I asked her about the messages, about the motorbike, about the guy in the photos, about calling me the old American ATM. My voice was shaking, but I got the words out. She didn't deny any of it. Just shrugged. Said, "You give money freely. No one force you. I never promise you anything in writing." Those were her exact words. "You give money freely." I said, "What about the school? What about your mother's surgery? What about the restaurant, the land, all of it?" She lit a cigarette, which I'd never seen her do before, and got real matter-of-fact about it. Said the school got some money, maybe 3,000. They were very grateful. Her mother never had surgery, just a checkup. The kidney problem was real, but not urgent, not life-threatening. The 28,000 I'd wired to the hospital never got there. She'd given me a fake account number, one she controlled. The restaurant didn't exist. The location I'd seen was Tuan's cousin's closed business. The partners I'd met were friends. The paperwork was fake. My 35,000 went straight into accounts she and Tuan controlled, split it up, spent it on motorcycles and trips, and God knows what else. The land, government-owned forest land, can't be sold to anyone, foreign or Vietnamese. The deposit, the survey fees, the permit fees, all of it went straight to her. The cousin who supposedly worked in real estate was her boyfriend, the guy in the photos, the one I'd been funding without knowing it. I felt like I was having another heart attack. That same crushing sensation in my chest. I asked her how much of my money actually went where she said it went. She did some math on her phone, casual as anything, said probably 15, maybe 20,000 went to actual things. The rest, about 75, 80,000, went to her and her family and her boyfriend. I asked why. Why string me along for so long? Why not just take everything at once and disappear? She looked at me like that was the stupidest question she'd ever heard. Said, "Because you keep giving. Why take everything now when you have pension every month? We think maybe 2, 3 more years, you still give money. But you start asking too many questions now. Get suspicious. So maybe time to finish." I told her I was going to the police, going to report her. She laughed. Actually laughed. Said, "Go ahead." Her cousin really was a cop. She'd tell him I'd been running illegal business investments without proper visas, which was true. I'd get deported, maybe face charges. And what proof did I have? I'd given money freely, wired it to accounts she showed me, no contracts, no written promises. In Vietnam, that's not a crime. That's just stupid foreigner not understanding culture. She packed her stuff. Didn't take long, she'd never really moved in. Took the cigarettes she'd left in my bathroom, took the t-shirt she was wearing, didn't even bother changing. Looked at me one more time from the door and said, "You not bad man, just lonely man. Lonely men, easy." Then she left. I sat on that balcony for maybe 3 hours. Couldn't move. Couldn't think. Just sat there watching the motorbikes go by, watching the city live its life while mine ended. Again. The next 3 days I spent trying to trace the money. Called the school. Talked to the principal through Google Translate. She was very grateful for my donation of $3,000, showed me the receipt. Asked if I wanted to see the work they'd done. I said no. Tried to call the hospital. The number Lynn had given me was disconnected. Found the main hospital line. Got transferred around for an hour. Finally got someone who spoke English. Gave them Lynn's mother's name, Nguyen T, which I learned is like saying Jane Smith in Vietnam. There's thousands of them. No record of kidney surgery for anyone matching the description in the last year. The account number I'd wired money to? Not affiliated with the hospital. Went to the restaurant address. Empty lot. Had been empty for 2 years, according to the coffee shop owner next door. No building permits filed. Nothing. Went to the land office, showed them the paperwork Lynn had given me. They looked at it, looked at me with pity, said this land is Cat Tien National Forest. Government protected, cannot be sold. The documents were fake. Not even good fakes. I did the final math sitting on my apartment floor with a bottle of cheap Vietnamese whiskey. Started with $95,000 in savings. Gone. Every penny. Spent another $13,000 from my pension over 14 months. Total loss, $93,000. 43 years of saving. Gone in 14 months. I sat there in that apartment, ceiling fan going, heat pressing in from outside, and I booked a flight to Mobile, $2,000 I didn't really have, leaving in 3 days. I'd go back, figure things out, admit to Danny what happened, deal with his "I told you so," find some place to die quietly where I wouldn't bother anybody. But then I thought about it. Really thought about it. Where was I going back to? The duplex was rented to my nephew. I'd have to find another place. Probably couldn't afford much on just the pension after I rebuilt a little savings. Danny would be sympathetic, but that look in his eyes, that disappointment, I couldn't handle that. The guys at the union hall hearing about it, the gossip, the pity. And what would I do there? Same thing I was doing before the heart attack. Sit alone, watch TV, wait to die. Except now I'd be doing it broke, stupid, and ashamed instead of just alone. The thing that hit me, sitting on that floor at 3 in the morning, was that Vietnam didn't rob me. Lynn did. And Lynn could have done the same thing to me in Mobile. Maybe not the exact same scam, but some version of it. Lonely man, desperate man, man who'd do anything to matter to someone before his time ran out. That's not geography. That's just me. I canceled the flight. Lost the booking fee, but kept the rest. Sat on that balcony watching the sunrise, drinking coffee, doing more math. My pension was $4,200 a month. I'd been spending $400 on rent, $800 on food and utilities, leaving $3,000 that I'd been giving to Lynn in one form or another. If I cut rent to maybe $250, $200 if I looked hard, kept food to $600, I could live on under $1,000 a month. That left $3,200. I'd need to rebuild some savings, but I could do it. Slowly. Or I could leave. Go back to Mobile. Eat the shame. Start over at 67 in the place that nearly killed me with loneliness before. I decided to stay. Not because Vietnam was great. Not because I loved Da Nang. But because running back to Mobile wouldn't fix what was broken. The problem wasn't Vietnam. The problem was me thinking I could buy my way into mattering. And I could learn that lesson here just as easy as anywhere. Besides, I kind of liked the morning walks on the beach, the coffee, the motorbikes, the weather, and nobody in Mobile knew what had happened. But nobody in Da Nang except Lynn and her family knew either. I could just be some other expat guy starting over. There were enough of us. So I stayed. I found a smaller apartment for $250 a month. Studio, older building, no balcony, but the AC worked and it was clean. Moved in with the one duffel I still had, my electrical kit, not much else. Started living on $900 a month. Left myself $3,300 to rebuild savings and have a cushion. The first month was rough. Not the money part. The shame part. Won $500. See other expats at coffee shops and wonder if they knew. If Lynn had told people. If I was the joke everyone whispered about. That old American who got taken for everything. But nobody seemed to know. Or if they did, they didn't care. Turned out I wasn't special. A lot of us had stories. I joined a different expat group. Met at a smaller cafe, fewer people, more honest. First meeting I went to, the organizer was this guy named Mike, about my age, from California. He opened by saying, "This is a judgment-free zone. We've all made mistakes here. We've all trusted the wrong people. We're here to help each other, not shame each other." Turned out half the guys there had similar stories, different details, but same basic plot. Gave money to someone they loved, found out it was a scam, lost everything or close to it. Some went home. Some stayed. The ones who stayed seemed okay. Not great, but okay. They'd figured out how to live on less, how to be more careful, how to find the real Vietnam underneath the tourist version. One guy, Australian named Pete, pulled me aside after that first meeting. Said he'd heard about what happened, that the expat community talks. Said he was sorry. Said if I needed electrical work, he ran a small cafe and could use help with some wiring. Cash work, nothing official, maybe 200 bucks. I said yes. That turned into other jobs. Pete told other expat business owners. Word got around that there was an American electrician who knew what he was doing, worked cheap, didn't ask questions about permits. I started getting calls. Fixed wiring in cafes, hostels, small restaurants. Installed ceiling fans, repaired breakers, upgraded panels, made between $200 and $400 a month extra. Enough for better food, occasional beer with the guys, slowly rebuilding my savings. But something unexpected happened. I started meeting actual Vietnamese people, not people trying to scam me, just regular folks trying to make a living. My new landlord was this older Vietnamese guy named Hai. When I moved in and explained I'd lost my money, that I needed cheap rent, he looked at me for a long time. Then he reduced my rent to $200, said he had a daughter, she was good girl, but he knew some Vietnamese people target foreigners. Said not all Vietnamese like that. Said he was sorry for what happened. The coffee shop I started going to, the owner was this woman, maybe 50, didn't speak much English, but she'd see me coming, start making my coffee before I even ordered. After a few weeks, she started giving me free refills. When I tried to pay, she'd wave me off. One day, she brought over this older Vietnamese man who spoke English. He translated. She said she knew what happened to me, everyone knows. She was sorry, coffee free for me from now on. I tried to argue, but she was firm. Started meeting local electricians through the work. They'd hear about jobs, pass them to me, take a small finder's fee. One guy, Thon, about 40, spoke decent English, started teaching me more Vietnamese. Real Vietnamese, not the tourist stuff. How to negotiate prices at markets, which neighborhoods were good, which to avoid. We'd have lunch sometimes after jobs. He'd explain Vietnamese culture, the real version, not the scam artist version. He told me about his family, wife, 3 kids, lived in a small house, made maybe $600 a month total as an electrician. I asked how he managed. He said family helps family. His parents live with them, help with kids. His brother helps with money when needed. Everyone shares everything. That's real Vietnamese culture, he said. Not taking money from foreigners. That's just criminals. Vietnam has criminals same as America. I started walking every morning on Mai Kay Beach. Same route, same time, just after sunrise. There were these banh mi vendors, 2 old ladies with their carts. Started going to the same one, practicing my Vietnamese. She'd correct my pronunciation, patient as anything. After a few weeks, she figured out I liked extra pate, no cilantro. Started making it that way without me asking. Charged me 20,000 dong, about $1. Never tried to charge me tourist prices. Her name was Hong. Her daughter sometimes worked the cart too. One morning the daughter, who spoke better English, told me Hong knew my story. Said her own son had been scammed by a foreigner once. Lost his motorbike deposit. Said scams go both ways. Said she liked that I stayed, that I didn't leave angry at all, Vietnamese people. Said her mom wanted me to know not everyone bad. That about broke me. Standing there holding my banh mi, trying not to cry in front of this old Vietnamese lady who was basically saying she was sorry for what happened to me. The work kept me busy. The people kept me human. And slowly, without really noticing it happening, I started actually living in Da Nang instead of just existing there. Started learning the bus routes, found the good markets where locals shop. Learned enough Vietnamese to have basic conversations. Made friends, real friends, with people who didn't want anything from me except company. About a year after Lynn, I needed curtains for my new apartment. Pete told me about this fabric shop in the In Hai district, said the owner was honest, good prices. I went on a Saturday afternoon. The shop was small, traditional Vietnamese fabrics mostly, silks and cottons in colors I couldn't name. The owner was there, woman about 52, 53, short, gray hair starting, kind face. She was helping another customer when I walked in, spoke to them in Vietnamese, patient and warm. When it was my turn, she switched to English. Said, "You need something?" I said. I needed curtains, showed her the measurements I'd written down. She led me to different fabrics, explained which ones would block light better, which ones would last longer in the humidity, which ones were in my budget. She wasn't trying to upsell me, just being helpful. Her name was Huang, widow, she said. Husband died 5 years ago, cancer. Ran this shop alone now, made enough to live. Her English was okay, better than my Vietnamese. She'd worked in tourism before her husband got sick, hotels mostly, that's where she learned. I picked out a simple cotton, light blue, she measured, said she'd hem it, could pick it up in 3 days, quoted me a price that seemed fair. I paid half up front, like she asked. When I came back to pick them up, they were perfect. Paid the rest, thanked her. She asked how long I'd been in Da Nang. I gave her the short version. 3 years, retired, liked it here. She said, "You speak Vietnamese, getting better." I laughed, said, "Not really." She said, "No, really. You try. That's good." Most foreigners never try. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. About Da Nang, about changes in the city, about the fabric business. Easy conversation. She mentioned her shop's electrical socket was acting funny, kept sparking. I said I was an electrician, could take a look if she wanted. She said she didn't have much money for repairs. I said I'd just look, no charge. The socket was dangerous. Bad wiring, could start a fire. I fixed it, took maybe 30 minutes, refused payment. She insisted on giving me tea, some Vietnamese cookies she had in back. We sat in her shop, drinking tea, talking about nothing important. It felt normal. Real. I started going back every couple weeks, just to browse, to practice Vietnamese, to talk. She never pushed me to buy anything. Sometimes I'd buy fabric for a project, sometimes just visit. She'd tell me about her family. Son and daughter-in-law, 2 grandkids. They lived in her house with her, helped with expenses. The shop made maybe $300-400 a month profit. Between that and her son's job, they managed. I told her my story, not all of it, but enough. Said I'd been scammed, lost my savings, staying anyway. She got quiet, then said, "I heard what happened to you. Everyone in expat community know. I'm sorry people can be cruel." Said her late husband used to say the same thing about Vietnamese who scam foreigners. Said it makes all Vietnamese look bad. Said she was glad I stayed. We started having coffee once a week, Sunday mornings, before she opened the shop, just talking. About life, about loss, about starting over. She'd lost her husband. I'd lost my savings and my pride. We understood each other. About 6 months after we met, I helped her with some accounting. She was struggling with the books, couldn't figure out where her money was going. I wasn't great at accounting, but I could manage a calculator. Showed her how to track expenses better. Set up a simple system. She was grateful. She taught me how to cook Vietnamese food. Real Vietnamese food, home cooking. Com tam the right way, proper pho broth. How to make spring rolls. Her kitchen became familiar. Her family became familiar. Her grandson, Min, was 12. Loved asking me questions about America in broken English. We became a couple without really deciding to become a couple. There was no big moment, no declaration. We just started spending more time together, started helping each other more, started being part of each other's lives. One day I realized I'd rather have coffee with her than anyone else. One day she said she liked having me around. We moved in together about 8 months after we met, pooled our resources. Rented a nicer place, $400 a month, 2 bedrooms, so Min could visit. My pension covered rent and food and utilities. Left about $1,500 a month we split for personal stuff and savings. Her shop brought in $300 to $500 a month profit. My electrical work brought in $200 to $400 most months. We weren't rich, but we were stable, honest, real. Look, I'm not going to stand here and tell you Vietnam ruined my life. Vietnam didn't take my money. I gave it to the wrong person because I was desperate to matter to somebody before my ticker gave out for good. That could have happened in mobile just as easy. Sharon left me because I couldn't figure out what mattered besides work. Lynn took my money because I couldn't figure out that love isn't something you buy. The lesson isn't, don't come to Vietnam. The lesson is, don't try to buy love anywhere. Don't let loneliness make you stupid. Don't think geography is going to fix what's broken inside you. I lost my savings. But I found out I could survive on less than I thought. I found out there are good people everywhere if you're patient enough to find them the right way. I found out that starting over means actually starting over, not trying to recreate what you had before with different scenery. I'm 69 now. I watch the sunrise over the Han River most mornings with Huang. We don't talk much. Her English is still rough. My Vietnamese is passable at best. But we're both there. Both real. Both got nothing to prove. I wire electrical panels for expat cafes, make enough for beer money and noodles. She sells fabrics to tourists and locals. We have Sunday dinners with her family. Her son treats me with respect. Her daughter-in-law makes me laugh. Min, her grandson, I'm teaching him basic electrical stuff. showing him how to use a multimeter, explaining how circuits work. Kid smart. Reminds me what it feels like to pass knowledge forward. That heart attack was supposed to be my ending. Turned out it was just intermission. I live my best life here now, not because Vietnam's paradise, but because I finally stopped running from myself and started building something real, something modest, something honest. Earl's story breaks the pattern we usually see here on Inside Vietnam. Yes, he lost $93,000. Yes, he was scammed by someone he loved. But he didn't leave bitter and broken. He stayed. He rebuilt. Why? Because he understood something crucial that a lot of people miss. Vietnam didn't fail Earl. His loneliness did. His desperate need to matter to someone. Those problems don't care about geography. If you come to Southeast Asia running from emptiness, you'll just be empty in a different location. The scammers exist everywhere, and they target desperation, not nationality. Earl's story ended well because he learned the lesson. He accepted the loss. He started building relationships on honesty instead of trying to buy his way into belonging. He found love the second time, not by opening his wallet, but by showing up authentically broke and broken, and finding someone who wanted his company, not his money. For those of you considering retiring abroad, Earl's advice is simple. Come for the right reasons. Adventure, affordability, culture, sure. But don't come to escape yourself. Keep your savings protected. Never invest in businesses you can't verify independently. Never transfer money for properties you can't legally own. Never pay for medical emergencies without verifying directly with the hospital. Build slowly. Trust carefully. And remember, if someone truly loves you, they won't threaten to leave every time you ask reasonable questions. Earl's living his best life in Da Nang now. Not the life he imagined with Lin in a big house on fake land, but a real life with Huang in a modest apartment, working with his hands, watching sunrises, teaching a grandson who isn't his by blood but treats him like family. Sometimes the best life isn't the biggest life. Sometimes it's just the real one. This has been Inside Vietnam. If Earl's story resonated with you, or if you have your own expat experience to share, leave a comment below. And remember, Vietnam isn't the villain in these stories. Desperation is. Stay safe out there, stay smart, and we'll see you in the next one.